Killing. It's one of the biggest quandaries of any superhero's soul. How far is too far when it comes to dealing with a major threat? Some heroes will tell you that even breaking a criminal's bones or leaving them limbless before arrest is taking things too far. Others are completely fine with using lethal force to eliminate threats they feel are permanent. Mark Grayson has been walking the thin line between these two broad schools of thought when it comes to safeguarding society. But even Spider-Man was forced to take a life or two, despite his great power, great responsibility shtick. So in this video, we will take a look at every person that Mark Grayson has killed and detail the impact each death has on his psyche. Spoiler alert for the comics, because we will be discussing a lot of those in this video, and without further ado, let's get straight to it. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Multi-Paul?
You!
Multiple clones of Multi-Paul. In the first couple of seasons, Mark took his responsibilities as a hero very seriously. He pulled his punches 9.9 times out of 10, and killing another person just never crossed his mind as a first resort, or a resort of any sort, up until he thought he killed Angstrom Levy. That changed everything for him, because that was the first time Mark allowed his rage to boil over and take control of his fists. Before that, Mark had only killed Reaniman or Magnemites, with a few Sequids thrown in for good measure during the first Sequid invasion attempt. But after pulverizing Angstrom's face, something changed within Mark. He became more accepting of his killer instinct, and the first person he tested it out on properly was Multi-Paul. Kate Cha's brother has the exact same power as her, but he himself is a villain. Still, when he heard that his sister had died during the Guardians' fight with the Lizard League, he couldn't help himself from blaming them. He found and engaged Rex Splode in a battle which Invincible broke up with a rather cold and methodical precision that we'd never seen from him before. He cut through dozens of Paul's clones without knowing which one was the Zero clone, and we're pretty sure Mark didn't care about finding the Zero clone. Once Paul was subdued, other characters commented on Invincible's new ruthlessness, and yes, he didn't kill Paul himself, but he killed so many of his clones that it was unsettling to see him covered in their limbs and blood. He very nonchalantly picks up Paul and drops him in prison because to him, that's the right thing to do. Of course, Paul eventually breaks out of prison with the help of his boss, Master Liu. But that's not why this encounter is so important. It marked the beginning of a path which sees Mark take a more brutal approach to fighting his enemies, one where killing them isn't completely off the table. In fact, the first person he kills isn't even an enemy, it's an old friend.
Kill me!
What?
I'm a mere husk.
Future Immortal. When Mark meets Dropkick and Fightmaster during his date with Eve in Paris, he half expects her to kill him. The last thing he wanted was to kill a man he admired and called friend, even if it was in an alternate timeline. But once the duo brought him to the future and showed him the tyranny they were living through, Mark had no choice but to help them out. He agrees to put an end to the reign of their king, but when he flies to his citadel, he's shocked to find Immortal there. Mark calls him by his name, and the fact that Immortal says it's the first time he's been called that in centuries should have tipped him off to the fact that something was terribly wrong. He tries talking to Immortal, tries to understand what made him go off the rails and turn into a dictator, but his friend ends up blaming him instead. Mark doesn't know it at the time, but he is the one who appoints Immortal Earth's ruler, while he tries to make the larger universe a better place. In the alternate timeline, Mark promised his friend he would come see him occasionally, but he never does. Immortal cracks under the pressure of power and loneliness, so when he sees Mark arrive, looking younger, he doesn't care that he's from the past. He just wants to die by his friend's hand. In the comics, it doesn't take much for Immortal to convince Mark. He starts shouting about how his current condition was Mark's fault, because it was his responsibility as Emperor to check in on things. He also punches Mark about 3 times before he snaps and beheads his old friend. Mark's reflection on what turned Immortal evil is rather short-lived, rage-filled, and not contemplative enough if you've We've seen the episode where Amazon adapted this issue because they knocked it out of the park with the emotion. You can tell Mark really doesn't want to kill his friend. Immortal drives him into a corner and forces him to do it, and once he does, he can't bring himself to believe that he killed a man he knew so intimately, but he does accept it. In the end, Mark's first proper kill was for the greater good, but he horrible because he had to kill his friend. He also thought that he had killed Angstrom Levy at this point, so add that to his consciousness, and he was the perfect recipe for a superhero on the verge of breaking bad. Luckily for us, when Mark does, he realizes that killing isn't his thing after all.
Whatever you are planning, it will fail.
Russ Livingston. The first time Mark fought against Sequid Russ Livingston, it was in space, and he believed the guy to be dead due to no fault of his own. But after that, he believed he'd killed Angstrom in a fit of rage, and he was led to believe that he'd killed Conquest as well. That second quote-unquote murder convinced Mark that he needed to permanently eliminate enemies that permanently threatened his home world, and the first person to fall victim to this mentality was Russ Livingston. Turns out he didn't die when the Guardians stopped the Sequid spaceship. He survived and spread the Sequids throughout his neighborhood. Russ became the conduit for a new hive mind bent upon capturing Earth, and while the GDA contained the Sequids within a protected dome, they didn't have enough operatives to take care of each of those gnarly brain things. Robot calculated that it would take them a long time to hold out and turn the tide, but they could do it. However, that didn't work for Mark. He was laser focused on nipping this problem in the bud, and to him, that bud was Russ Livingston. Killing the main host would slow down the Sequids long enough for them to be contained, so he killed him on live TV in front of millions of people and his teammates. Mark justified it by saying he didn't have a choice for the first couple of days. He said this to Robot, who questioned him immediately after he took Russ's head off, and repeated it to Cecil when the latter called him in to evaluate their position. But Mark also acknowledged that he crossed the line and that killing Russ didn't really make him feel the way he thought it would. This is because no matter how much time it would have taken, he could have found a way to get the Sequids off of him and resolved the situation without killing him. Mark felt incredibly guilty about his newfound permanent solution mentality, so he decided to abandon it in favor of temperance. He resolved to never kill again unless it was absolutely necessary, because he knew that not every person he fought deserved death. Darkwing and D.A. Sinclair had reformed themselves to the point they were happily cooperating with the GDA. Russ could have done something good for this world had he been given a second shot at life. Mark came to deeply appreciate the responsibility that his powers posed in front of him, and he recalled the message he took from killing future Immortal. Like his friend, Mark, too, was going to outlive everyone he knew and loved, unless they were Viltrumites. He knew how easily he could get detached from his humanity and go crazy like Immortal and his many evil variants. Killing Russ opened his eyes to the fact that he was taking that path, so he course-corrected by reverting to his original suit and resuming his association with Cecil on a loose basis. Mark felt a renewed conviction in his duties as a superhero, which is why it's kind of crazy that Kirkman had him kill a character soon after this realization. But in his defense, this was one of the people for whom Mark's last resort wasn't nearly enough of a punishment. Conquest. Mark might have just whooped Conquest's butt and put him in a Viltrumite ICU, but we all know that isn't going to stick, right? Conquest is a guy who survived getting eaten by the Ragnar, and they're the only species in the universe who can hunt down Viltrumites. Cecil letting him survive was a big mistake, because as soon as he regained enough strength to fly, he broke out of the GDA black site he was being kept at and went straight back to his leader. He was patched up and sent back out as the Empire's vanguard against the coalition of planets. Who should he find there but Mark? Invincible is shocked to see Conquest still alive, and he figures out that Cecil lied to him, but he has no time to process all this information because the brute goes for his kid brother first, and Mark isn't having any of that. He flies after Conquest and slams him into the surface of a planet with a breathable atmosphere, engaging him in one of his most brutal fights by far. Mark is so angry that he overrides his comparative weakness, grabs hold of Conquest's neck, and doesn't let go despite despite getting his guts pulled out of his body. This wouldn't be the last time that such a thing happens to him either, but the fact that Mark wins out in the end is what's so sickeningly impressive about him versus Conquest 2.0. The power difference, the two of them, is noticeable, but Mark's anger makes him blackout. Once he grabs Conquest's throat, he chokes him until his eyes turn red and his tongue lolls out of his mouth, limp and lifeless. He passes out, and it takes him several months to regain consciousness, but the first thing he says as he wakes up is, "Kill you." Mark doesn't even realize he has accomplished his goal, but considering it was Conquest or Oliver who would survive, making the choice to kill the former was an easy one. And if we're being honest, taking out Conquest was akin to doing a public service for the entire universe. Conquest was one of the strongest enforcers of the Viltrumite Empire, and he was responsible for countless massacres in multiple galaxies. He would have annihilated Earth's population had Mark not killed him, because Conquest didn't know the meaning of the word stop. This didn't change the fact that Mark was still determined to resolve things as peacefully as possible after his experience with Russ, because he let the next guy on our list live way longer than he should have. And he did it because he was confused whether he could see the big picture or not. Dinosaurus. Dinosaurus is an interesting character in that he becomes representative of the last remnant of Mark's naive hero brain. One of his greatest regrets in life is all the collateral damage that comes out of his big, explosive action sequences. Mark is an incredibly strong individual, but the thing about incredibly strong individuals is that they invite challenge by their very nature. The first time he caused insane amounts of destruction unintentionally was when he fought his dad. Mark and Omni-Man killed so many people that they ended up creating a vengeful superhero in Powerplex. And every time he shows up, Mark is reminded of the people he sent to the grave. Dinosaurus makes him feel the same way the first time he encounters the guy, because he turns Las Vegas into a massive solar panel just because it would be good for the Earth. Mark is unable to prevent the deaths of millions, and it eats at him until he sees Dino's predictions come true and the GDA create the solar panel he said that they would. This inspired him to break the guy out of prison and try to reform him, because he knew that Dino's long-term vision wasn't the problem, his immediate actions were. Dino was given to taking extreme measures to address big picture problems, and it's when he floods the world by destroying Greenland that Mark realizes just how wrong he was in trying to help the guy. He manages to track down Dinosaurus and minimize the damage caused by his actions as much as he could, but ultimately, millions die once again because of his actions. During their ultimate fight, Dinosaurus uses a special frequency to put Mark in a comatose state and kills a double of his to clear him of all charges. But when Mark wakes up and makes him realize all that could have been a conversation, he has a mental breakdown. Dino asks Mark to kill him so he can atone for his sins, and this time he doesn't hesitate. Cecil arrives shortly after to check on him, and the blood on Mark's clothes is all the confirmation we need. To signify his growth as a man, he goes back to working with the GDA, and when Cecil tells him he made Reanimant out of the corpses of his evil variants, Mark is completely fine with it. He understands now that the word hero doesn't describe what he is. That responsibility cannot be shouldered by one person alone, and things aren't as black and white as he thinks they are. Mark going back to work for the government that he's been pushing away all of Season 3 might make you think he's flipping on his ideals, but it actually represents his maturity. Because at the end of the day, no matter how controversial his methods are, Cecil always keeps Earth's safety before everything else, and he doesn't do it to be a hero. He does it because it's the right thing to do. That's more than Mark can say. He's done 100 issues into his story, so he learns how to make compromises and the right judgment calls with Dino's death. He goes into his final battle with Dinosaurus as a boy, and he emerges from it as a man. That is the lens through which we will be looking at his final 3 kills, because they show just how far Mark has come as a person and how far he still has to go. Onan. Our number 3 entry on this list is a killing Mark commits out of rage and a feeling of vengeance. At one point in the story, Mark disappears for 5 years and everything changes in his absence. Tara grows up, Nolan starts cooperating with an enemy of his, Eve takes on a lover, and Oliver becomes a double agent for Thrag. That last development occurs on Alan's command, who is the leader of the coalition at this point. He knows that sending Oliver undercover is a big risk, but now that Mark refuses to fight in order to reconcile reconcile with his family, he has no other option. This backfires on Alan when Thrag learns of Mark's isolation on a secluded planet and sends his prized twins to kill him. Oliver tries to beg him off, saying that he can convince Mark to join them, but Thrag is too smart to listen to him at this stage. He has been a military leader for millennia, and he knows better than to trust a traitor's word. His daughter Ursal is tangling with Adam Eve after she and her brother arrive on Mark's planet, but Onan goes after his daughter Tara. Mark initially tries to fly away with her as fast as he can without suffocating her because Tara is a baby, but when Onan keeps catching up to him, he has to turn around and fight him. Then Thrag shows up unexpectedly, and though he commends Tara's unnatural strength and abilities at her age, for she learned how to fly mid-ambush, he couldn't let her live. Oliver arrived to try to save his brother's family, but Thrag kills him for betraying him and staying true to the Coalition. He then proceeds to crush Tara's skull, but is immediately stopped by Mark, who arrives grabbing Onan by the throat. He tells Thrag that they'll exchange hostages and end this madness right there. Mark doesn't want to kill Onan, but he will if Thrag pushes him. The former Grand Regent thinks Invincible is bluffing because he knows he's a good guy, a hero, and heroes don't go around killing people. But Mark calls being hero bullshit and snaps Onan's neck in half. He and Eve rescue Tara in the process, but Thrag and Ursal leave the couple battered and broken. Luckily, Eve's mental blockers come off and she's able to heal herself, Mark, and Tara, while giving them a bit of a power boost, but this seals Thrag's fate. Mark was not going to fight the new Viltrum Empire because he'd decided to dedicate himself to his family, but he had no choice now, seeing as his family was their prime target. The killing of Onan was the turning point in his and Eve's family problems, because instead of driving them apart, it brought them closer than ever. She had been on the fence about reconciling with Mark after he disappeared for 5 years, but now that their family was in danger, Eve was willing to forget all that just to kick Thrag's ass. You might think that Mark revenge killing Onan makes him a bad guy, but trust us when we say they saved the universe from Thrag 2.0. Ursal is still somewhat compassionate because she doesn't kill Eve immediately, despite the fact that she could do it easily. But Onan only cares about deriving sadistic pleasure out of killing his targets. The fact that he kept going for Tara when Mark was supposed to be his mark tells you just how evil the universe would have become had he survived. So while his motivations might not have been the purest, Mark did end up making the world a better place. And he would do that with his last 2 killings as well. Thrag. Killing Thrag became Mark's sole purpose after he defeated Conquest, because not only did Thrag nearly kill him, his brother, and their father, he also ended up taking his entire planet hostage. Thrag moved his Viltrumites to planet Earth, where he intended for them to interbreed with humans so that the Viltrumites could thrive again. He knew that human DNA was 99.9% identical to Viltrumite DNA, and losing 0.1% of purity in exchange for the survival of his species was a sacrifice he was willing to make. He might have succeeded in his mission had he not prioritized personal glory at a crucial moment, because he had Mark and Nolan eating out of the palm of their hands. He knew they wouldn't risk opposing him if it destroyed their precious Earth, so he'd effectively won the war with the Coalition, despite technically losing to them. It was his denial of Nolan's birthright that made him public enemy number 1 again, and once he killed Oliver, it was only a matter of time before Mark avenged his brother. His final fight with Thrag saw Mark kill many of his children, but Thrag used his own kids as weapons against him. This was the moment that proved to Mark that there was no redemption in his enemy. After Thrag mortally wounded Nolan, Mark flew him into the sun that they were fighting near, and proceeded to beat the flesh off of him. Sure, the sun's immense heat helped, but Mark's fists were doing just as much damage, and he had Robot's ultra-heavy space battle armor with him to keep him alive longer than his enemy. With every physical exchange, Kirkman described Mark's mental space, and you can see that he isn't exactly trying to kill Thrag. He's fighting to protect an ideal, even if it results in Thrag's death. Mark recognizes that he isn't a hero, but he doesn't want to be one anymore. He wants to be a leader, just like his dad. Under Nolan, the Viltrumites became a race more compassionate than he'd ever have given them credit for, and Mark was willing to die to keep that revolution going. He knew he fought to protect his family, his people, universal peace, and the concept of love itself, because he tells Thrag he won't let him kill any more of his own kids for something as petty as revenge. It's kind of hypocritical, seeing as he killed Onan for the exact same reason, but you need to read the comics to understand why this is different. Onan was Thrag's worst offspring. The ones he used as clubs to beat Mark probably weren't. In fact, once Ursal saw her dad using her siblings as meat swords, she told her siblings to surrender, and none of them resisted. Mark finally managed to beat Thrag into the molten pools of heat that is the sun's surface, and he only survived by Alan flew him out of there in time. He looked like Gon from Hunter after he sacrificed his Nen to kill P2, but luckily for Mark, Taylor's Kriya technology is as advanced as Nanika's powers. Mark is given artificial skin to replace the skin he lost to the sun, and he's back up in a few days, as opposed to being in a grave. Killing Thrag was Mark's greatest achievement because it signified his transition from hero to leader, and the final kill on our list cemented that fact. Robot. As soon as Mark recovered from his Thrag fight, his base was attacked by a man he once called friend, but now knew as a bitter enemy. Things change quite dramatically with Robot's character over the course of the story. He goes from being the man in the chair for the Teen Team and the Guardians of the Globe to a tyrannical dictator after getting stuck in the Flaxen dimension. He has an extremely toxic relationship with Monster Girl, which causes her to cheat on him, and when he returns to Earth finally, Robot plans to take it over. He puts his plan in motion after he and Mark visit an alternate dimension to ensure Angstrom Levy is dead by stranding Mark there and telling all their friends that he died. By the time Mark makes it back to his world, Robot already has all the pieces for his takeover in place. He starts by killing Cecil Stedman because the GDA would have been his first obstacle. But with Cecil out of the way, things would go a lot smoother. And they did, because Robot pretty much conquered Earth overnight. But in doing so, he made enemies out of Immortal and Invincible. Mark tried to see things from Rudy's perspective when he told him that he was going to make Earth better. But forced peace and tranquility is not worth it when people don't have their freedom. So Mark decides to oppose him despite their history. He doesn't do this immediately. He takes his family to Tails Kriya first and starts a new life there because family is his first priority now. But when Robot shows up to assist him in his final battle with Thrag, he's both grateful and apprehensive. Grateful because it proves that even his enemies were willing to cooperate with him and help him when their shared goals were larger than their differences. But apprehensive because he knew Robot was too logical to help him without there being a larger game at play. He was proven right when Robot tried to attack him and the Coalition forces immediately after Mark's recovery, and to make matters worse, he turned the Viltrumites against him by taking their Earthborn children hostage. Invincible ended up rallying every single hero and villain on Earth that hadn't aligned themselves with Robot, and getting them to keep his drones engaged while he found the real Rudy. He was helped by Monster Girl with that, and as soon as Mark located the real Robot among his drones, he took him out to orbit. In their final conversation, Mark admitted that the system Robot had instituted worked. Earth was more organized and peaceful than ever before, and if they followed Robot's policies, it would prosper even further. But Rudy wasn't the man for the job. His emotions were making him commit atrocities he never would have when he and Mark first met. So Invincible kills his old friend and then has his brain revived to preserve his greatest ideas. Mark uses D.A. Sinclair to do this because he knows Sinclair is the foremost authority on the undead, and he appoints Immortal as the man through whom all of Rudy's new policies would be filtered. This solves two problems at once because Mark remembers how his friend went insane in that future timeline. By removing Robot's ability to do anything but give advice, he ensured the guy wouldn't try any more clandestine takeovers. And by giving him to Immortal, he ensured Immortal wouldn't go insane by his lonesome. Mark's killing of Robot was a tragic yet hopeful development because it clearly highlighted the very long way he had come since the beginning of the series. When he finally becomes the third emperor of the Viltrum Empire, he's recognized as a man worthy of following because he never kills as his first resort. Mark teaches his people compassion and the true meaning of life, telling them to avoid using lethal force unless it is absolutely necessary, and they learn from his example. He lets all of Thrag's children live and join his empire, where Thrag would have either made them prove their loyalty or killed them outright. The death of Robot marks the birth of Emperor Mark Grayson, and if you want to know more about that, check out our entire life of Emperor Mark Grayson video. As for this one, we hope you enjoyed this detailed case study of every person whose life has been taken by Invincible, because marvelous verdict. That's all we've got in this one. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below because we're really interested in hearing what you think about Mark's growth through death. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Invincible content. Stay safe, and we will see you guys